welcome to another episode of Let's Have Words. I'm your host for the evening, Lara Samuels, host every evening. And Let's Have Words is a talk show that comes to you every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and we're broadcasting on WWHR Internet Media. And if you've never been to Let's Have Words before, you might be curious about what it's about. And this show is a talk show. We are still working on our mission statement, but I would say in general, our mission statement is to sort of celebrate the art of communication, especially in a period of time when it seems like some elements of communication are being lost as we move forever forward with our technological advancement. So, and ironically, that is what we're going to talk about tonight too. So, just for those of you who are new to Let's Have Words, Let's Have Words has about two different kinds of shows. One type of show we have a guest on, and we do a little interview. And in those types of shows, like we had last week, we had Jason Campbell on. We talked about Dungeons and Dragons. We talked about the role-playing games in general, and with Jason Campbell. And when we have a guest on, we ask that participants put their questions and comments in the chat. The other type of show is like tonight's show, which is an open discussion where we open up the phones at some point and we let people come on with their videos on, and you can come into the studio and into the virtual studio, I should say, and join the conversation that way. You can still post your questions and comments in the chat, of course, but if you'd like to come on with your video on and enter the studio, that is what we encourage, and we can handle multiple people at the same time. Now, we don't want the whole thing to fill up with so many people that we can't have an effective discussion, but, we can handle 3, 4, or possibly even 5 people in the studio at the same time. So just because somebody's in the studio, please don't feel like you can't come on too, okay? So, open discussion time. So what we do on an open discussion night is basically we have a topic that I introduce, and I already sort of hinted at tonight's topic, which is basically technology's effect on communication. So let me talk about my feelings about this first before we move forward. Now, I guess that we're mostly focusing on the negatives, how technology has actually affected our communication in a detrimental way. However, of course, you could mention, if you wanted to, some positives. So let's start there with that technology has added to our communication. A couple things I thought about. Maybe you can think about some more things, but one thing I thought about was, of course, that with social media, we're able to keep in touch with people that we would otherwise probably lose touch with. Now, whether that keeping in touch is superficial and meaningless is another discussion, but it's certainly possible to keep in touch with a number of people from your past. It's much easier to do that than it used to be, so that's a good thing. I'd say that's an overall positive. And also, of course, in an urgent situation or in an immediate situation, you, of course, can communicate in real time, which is also, I think, in some situations might be beneficial. But overall, I think we're going to focus on the negative impact. I like to, myself, I prefer face-to-face communication, even though, like a lot of people, have a lot of social anxiety when it comes to small talk or talking to people at a party or talking to people at an office, meeting or whatever. However, I think that, that social, I still prefer that method of communication over all others. I mean, to the point, I don't know why, I think a number of reasons why I like face-to-face communication. I like the sort of organicness of it and the spontaneity of it. And of course, I like to see, a big part of communication. And I think actually we have the breakdown. Mark could put it up on the screen. So about 55% of communication is nonverbal, and 38% vocal, meaning your tone of voice, of course, and 7% words. So if you are just texting, emailing, etc., That's only 7%. You're only tapping into like 7% of communication, because a person, of course, can't hear you and also can't see your gestures, your body language, and stuff like that. So you miss out on a huge component of communication when you don't talk face to face. And of course, video conferencing is the best substitute for face to face communication. Maybe not perfect, but of course, you can at least see some of the person's body language, and you can also gauge their mood, their tone of voice, all of that stuff in video conferencing. So video conferencing, although it might not be quite as good as face-to-face communication, is still a good substitute for if you can't be face-to-face, obviously. I like the organicness of it. I like the spontaneity of it. And I like to know I like to see people's body language and things like that, because otherwise I feel like I'm not completely, connecting with the person. And I mean, I will go out of my way to communicate face to face. I'll give you a couple of examples. So when I was working as a nurse, they give everybody a little phone, and I would use that phone exclusively for, emergency type situations, if I needed somebody immediately. But if I just needed to ask a question, or I just needed somebody, I needed to, brainstorm with somebody or whatever, I would walk all over that floor to track people down, to find them so that I could talk to them face to face. And I do the same thing now. I'm actually a teacher now, but I will walk all the way over to somebody's office, no matter how far away it is, even to ask the most petty, simple question, rather than email them or call them on the phone. That's how much I prefer face-to-face communication. I've always hated talking on the phone, even, because I like to see people when I'm talking to them. So I don't know you can psychoanalyze me if you want. That's good. I mean, I don't exactly know why that's the case, but I just, I go to extremes to make sure that I'd rather, inconvenience myself to have a face-to-face conversation. So I don't know if you're like that, but I certainly am. So I am a big fan. That's what I'm trying to say. So just to elevate this a little to a different level here, I do want to mention that I was reading a little bit about this topic, and I was reading some of the MIT professor Sherry Turkle, what she had to say. She's written a number of books on the subject of technology and communication. One of her books, I think you have the names of some of her books. So Alone Together. I actually haven't read any of her books, but I've read some of her articles, and she did a TED Talk, and I've heard interviews with her and stuff, but I haven't actually read her books, which I should do. But she wrote Alone Together, which is about the fact, of course, that even though we're all super connected, we're alone. It's the famous the whole family sitting at the table and everybody's talking or everybody's texting on their cell phone and nobody's interacting, kind of a scenario. And then Reclaiming Conversation came out in 2015, and that is a book that focuses a lot on this idea of face-to-face communication. And a couple of points that she brings up that, once again, I haven't read the books, but I've read some of the articles and stuff about, and interviews with her and stuff. And some of the things that she says, one of the things that she said that I thought was super interesting is that she says face-to-face communication requires a certain amount of tolerance for boredom, because most of the time when you're talking to somebody face-to-face, it's not exciting, it's not engaging, it's boring, mundane crap that you're throwing around, right? But then sort of like strewn about, in that sort of boring, mundane stuff are real gems of meaningfulness and interaction that just occur spontaneously. And that's where you really, really connect with people, right? And she says that the planned conversation that occurs in texting and emailing, lacks that spontaneity, and therefore you never get to those moments of real intimate connection with another human being. And so, and this has a number of effects on the way we regard others. Like, for example, it affects, our level of empathy towards other people. So anyway, very interesting concept, right? That you kind of have to sit through the boring parts to get those gems of meaning out of interaction with other people. She states that when we text or email or whatever, we're talking at one another, but we're not speaking with one another, right? So there's a big difference in quality between those two things. And of course, she also brings up the fact that I think, is something that many people have recognized, that even though we're more connected than ever, people are more also lonelier than ever because we're not having these meaningful interactions with people. Just because you're connected to people, there's a big emphasis on sort of showmanship, or she says, versus actual interaction. So those are just some of the things she mentioned, and there's more. There's actually a lot more, but those are just some of the things I pulled out of her thoughts. That's Sherry Turkle. She's an MIT professor who writes extensively on the subject of technology and communication. So a couple of questions I have. So, as I understand it, a big chunk of, and I'm just saying big chunk because I had trouble actually finding a study that I was satisfied with, but apparently, according to a number of surveys and stuff, a big chunk of young people, teenagers, are not comfortable with face-to-face communication, or even don't even care about it. Like, they don't even want to have any sort of face-to-face communication. Something like, let's say 35%. 65% of millennials don't feel comfortable in face-to-face social interactions. Although I would argue that when I was young, I would probably, if somebody asked me if I was comfortable in face-to-face interactions, I would say no. So I don't know if that's actually changed, or if it's getting worse or whatever, I don't know. But I think a lot of young people, though, are just not even interested. That's the thing. I mean, all of us have some, not all of us, but a lot of us have some level of social anxiety. However, a lot of young people don't even want to engage in face-to-face conversation. And my big question, the thing that's always buzzing around in my head about this is, is this just evolution of communication? People, older people kind of wringing their hands over, oh, we're losing all these skills, that are required for face-to-face communication, and oh no. But maybe, that's just the way things are going, and we should get over it, right? You just have to roll with the changes on some level. Or is face-to-face communication somehow fundamental to our humanity? I mean, is it something that is just so important in just, being human that, that we need to fight to preserve it or something? I mean, so this is the thing that I'm always torn about. Am I just wringing my hands over something that is just inevitable, and it's just, maybe it's not even bad, change happens, and a lot of times things don't get worse, they don't get better, they're just different, and sometimes you have to embrace that change and not fret too much, not be one of those, oh, the good old days were so much better people, right? And I just wonder about that. I wonder if there's something that fundamental that's being lost here, or if it's just change. It's just so you can call in, chat in, or come on with your video and weigh in on some of these issues. I've got a lot more to talk about, but that was just some of the things I was thinking about to open the discussion. So we'll just open up the phones, and if you'd like to come on, otherwise I'll just keep blabbing away. So if you'd like to participate in the conversation, we're talking about technology's effect on communication. We got a lot of directions we can go, for sure. So how do you like to communicate? Are you somebody who likes to communicate through text, email, or do you prefer, like me, do you prefer face-to-face conversation. What do you think about this format right here, the video conferencing? Do you think it's a good substitute for face-to-face conversation, or is there something lacking even here that isn't quite the same? So even though we can determine body language, well, you're only seeing me from this far up, so you can't see what my feet are doing. So you can't see my whole body, so you only get to see some of my body language, and but you get to hear my tone of voice, and so there's a good chunk of communication that is still preserved, I think, in the video conference format. But what do you think? Do you think it's a good substitute or not? What do you think? Is there something that we're losing from interacting when we're relying too much on emails and texting and that sort of thing? What are we missing out on? Are we losing? What skills are we sacrificing? And does it matter? If communication is heading in this direction anyway, then what difference does it make, right? If people lose the skills, it's like cursive writing, right? We don't need it anymore. The electronic, I continue to have an ongoing conversation with family and friends. Yeah, right. So there's a good point, Mark. There's a time and a place certainly for this type of communication. But the question is, are we relying on it too much? And is it becoming such a dominant force in our lives that we're losing, as a society, we're losing certain skills? Are we missing out on fundamental human experience? Doesn't matter. Like I said, maybe it doesn't matter. This is the future, people. So, what I have behind me here, I think, this is an illustration. The name of the artist is in the lower right-hand corner there. So what I think is going on in this picture, I'm pretty sure, is that's an empathy robot. So I don't think we're at the point where we have humanoid empathy robots, but certainly this technology is around, and machines are now able to express a certain level of empathy. And what is that going to do, right? That's a whole other level. When machines start being able to, enter the emotional realm of human experience, what's that? What kind of change is that going to, cause? I don't know. Anyway, I think that's an empathy robot. You can just sit around and can you imagine you having just it's like having somebody that just listens to you and feels sorry for you and tells you, actively listens. But if it's not a human, I don't know. I couldn't accept that. I couldn't accept that. So what about the like talking to your toaster? Yeah, exactly. I don't want to have. I do actually talk to my toaster, but I don't expect my toaster to express empathy. I don't tell it my problems. I request that it, stop burning my toast. But that's the extent of the conversation. However, I don't know. Maybe it's good. Maybe it's a good thing. A lot of people are lonely. Don't necessarily have somebody to listen to them. And maybe having an empathy robot is a good thing on some level for some people. I don't know. What do you think? You can come in with your video on into the room, or you can text or put your questions, comments in the chat. We're talking about technology and communication here on Let's Have Words tonight. So, all right. Video conferencing. What do you think about that? Is it as good as face-to-face? What's different? Something I always think about is the etiquette, surrounding how does technology change etiquette? surrounding conversation. So, you know, what's accepted as polite or, is that changing? So I recall having, in a class that I was teaching, I had a student who was much younger than me, and in the class state that people don't, call, like her group of friends or whatever, or people that she knows, they don't call when they're late, to tell somebody they're going to be late. That's not something they do, right? And I'm thinking to myself, really, isn't that just regular old everyday courtesy? I mean, like, how can you even function? Like, if I'm sitting there waiting for somebody and they're wicked late and they don't call me and let me know what's going on, I'm going to be mad, right? First I'm going to be worried. Common courtesy. Thank you, Aspen. Yes, first I'm going to be worried, and then I'm going to be angry. I'm going to go through the phases, but it's not going to be a good thing. I'm going to have a lot of anxiety, right? And so is that a nice thing to do to somebody? I don't know. Is that universal? According to my student, not so much. It's not the expectation. We have a caller. Hi there, Conrad.
Hello.
For those of you that are new to Let's Have Words, this is Conrad. It's a friend of the show, frequent caller on Let's Have Words. Has lots of thoughts on various topics. So what are you thinking about today? About this? Anything?
Well, so the fact that we can talk remotely, especially with the video,
Yeah.
I think it does bring us closer together. For example, my last job I worked, the parent company was in Florida, and every day we would have Skype meetings.
Yeah.
At least, I think it was without the video, maybe later with video, I forget how we mixed that.
Yeah.
Later at some point video became available. And it helped because you can hear people, not just read emails, not just text, not just because it was emails, otherwise. So there was interaction, live interaction.
Yeah, the video conferencing I would say is closer to face than, for the reasons I cited, which is that you have body language, you can assess somebody's mood, somebody's tone. All of those aspects of communication are preserved in a video conferencing format. And all of those things are completely absent when you email or text.
Right. That's
completely absent. No body language, no tone of voice. You have none of that information. So the video conferencing is about as good as, well, and now we're entering the age of the metaverse, of course, where we'll be like, I understand, right, a three-dimensional world that we actually interact with very similarly to the way we interact in real life. So
one of my experience with communication was telephone.
I hate telephones. I hate talking on the phone.
Well, and when I talked to my grandfather in Europe, that was the only way. There were letters, which would take weeks to get, a month or whatever to go across Atlantic, post.
Right.
Blah. Or we could talk to each other. The difference between Skype, for example, was the price. Skype is essentially free. You're paying for internet, and after that is free for your connection to the internet, and then it's free. We can talk for an hour. And before, when we talked, this was 80s, and we talked on the phone, but it was still, I could still recognize his voice. He could recognize my voice.
Right.
Still better than writing letters.
Oh, yeah, right, exactly. Because you can have a real conversation in real time. Yeah, a two-way interaction.
Right, but you can
even though it's just voice.
Right, and the phone.
Yeah, and you can hear somebody's tone, like you can the inflections that they use and stuff like that. So even though you can't see the body language, it's still not that bad. Yeah. It's not as
So-
bad as texting, which has nothing
So,
but the words themselves, and that's it, and an emoji or two.
nothing replaces in-person meeting somebody and talking.
Do you think that, okay, so this is my fundamental question tonight. Do you think, this is the question I'm going to pose to you. Do you think that face-to-face conversation, there's something essential about it? Or do you think that it's just going to, eventually, virtual communication is going to replace it, and that's just going to be the end of it, and that's just the way things are?
Well, I don't think it can physically, I don't think it can really replace it.
Do you think there's something fundamental about
It
face-to-face?
may come close to it. Well, for example, if we're sitting at a table, I can pass you a glass and I can pour you a drink or whatever.
Yes,
Where you can't you can interact like that.
right,
If you
Right.
host somebody, you can, hey, you want some ice cream, you want some ginger ale or something. But even just, somebody drops something, says, hey,
you can share a joint or something. Aspen, I test message extensively and allows me to weed out the stupid shit I would say face-to-face. Good point. But that's the censored, you can censor yourself, but then you're not experiencing those moments of awkwardness or whatever that are somewhat, I don't know, it's just part of human experience, It's like younger people are afraid of face-to-face communication because it makes them feel awkward or it gives them anxiety. But hello, I think it does that when I always feel awkward in a social situation, but it's you put yourself through it because you gain something from it, and you learn. The more you do it, the better you get at it. It's just like anything else, it's a skill. And people just want to run away from it, like, oh no,
Well, there was a big difference where I grew up initially without a TV.
Yeah,
So we listened to the radio.
yeah,
Then we got a TV, and you can actually see the speakers or whatever, and there was a big difference.
yeah,
Even obviously it was politicians or whatever, whoever you would be talking, actors, you know what I mean. But there was a big difference with the video in it. So they had to dress up. They had to look for video on the phone, on the radio. Who knows what they could be in their under.
exactly. That's the nice thing about it. Yeah,
There is no limit. There is no. So I can see how younger people, there is extra exposure when you're physically face to face with somebody. It is different, and if they are not used to it, which is actually scary
yeah,
to me,
yeah.
that it can lead to that all this computer or wire communication can make people so actually estranged of physical,
Yeah.
of
So-
the world.
Yeah, so can you put up Lois's comment, the first part of it? So Lois says she's been in quarantine for 7 days. Sorry, Lois. Quarantine for 7 days. All her communications have been text, phone, Zoom. So yes, like when you're in a situation like that, you really appreciate it. Does not replace in person, exactly. Yeah. So once again, it's a tool, right? And there's definitely a time and a place for it. But is it a good substitute? I don't know. I mean, and are we losing things? So as a society, what are we losing when we rely too much on texting and emailing and that sort of thing to communicate?
Well, we become, like you said, we can become estranged
Yeah.
from other people, to being with people, with strangers.
Yeah, you lose sort of that the interaction, like the interpersonal skills that you can develop when you talk to somebody face to face, and you lose empathy, and you lose that
So
sense
I
of
actually-
connection, and
So since I'm a little bit into science, I actually thought about one of the differences.
just a little bit into science. Yeah,
No Nobel Prize yet.
you're working on a Nobel, huh? Way to go.
What was I? Oh, No, I
Go
actually
ahead, sorry.
came up with the difference between, the reason why there's a physical difference. Our brains emanate electromagnetic waves. So
Okay,
anything that generates waves is like an antenna, also receives. So
I
we
see.
can feel each other, read people, not read people's minds, but it's not just the expression on the face, smile or grumpy, you know what I mean? But they're probably, well, from
There's
my,
like, you're saying there's like an electromagnetic force that's
right,
happening when we're interacting in real time that
we feel it, and we feel it,
is
and we feel
absent in any other,
absolutely.
any other venue. Okay,
So I'm
interesting.
not sure if any serious studies were made of it, because I did read about it some years ago, and it's like, hey,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you generate a lot of electromagnetic waves, and they verify that,
yeah,
any antenna that transmits can also receive.
interesting.
So we can, again, it's not that we
So
can.
something just completely intangible, like this, just this feeling that we have when we're in person with somebody.
That's what I'm talking about.
But
It's a
is this supposed? Has it been demonstrated to produce any like positive health effects or so? I do know that being with other people and being social is a big component of like people who have good quality of life, and people who have meaningful social interactions live longer, they're healthier, they're like, so being social is, and being lonely, I think we've said this before, is equivalent to like smoking a pack of cigarettes a day or something. Like loneliness is very detrimental to your health, and being social is very positive. But I don't exactly know why. I mean, and maybe that's one reason. Maybe there's some sort of, you know, electrochemical interaction that's going on that,
so electro,
is somehow essential to our health and
electromagnetic,
well-being. I don't know.
our
Yeah.
brains emit electromagnetic waves.
Yeah.
Is
So
that correct?
that's fascinating. I didn't know that. So Ronnie had a comment, and I didn't see it. Can we put it back up? I used to love talking on the phone, but nobody does anymore. I don't like to call somebody now for fear of catching them at a bad time. Right. That's so true. That's so true. Like, you don't. It used to be you just call somebody, and now you're afraid. I totally agree. It's like, oh, maybe I'll interrupt them or something. And you didn't really used to think that way. You just friggin' call people.
Well, I think
Yeah.
I have a comment on that.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
On a house phone, it's different. On a cell phone, it's different.
Yeah.
On a cell phone, you could be in traffic, in a store, you could be, who knows what you are doing.
Yeah.
Where at home, if the home phone, it's a little different. You're not home, you're not picking up, or you're home, hey,
Yeah.
chances are it's safe.
I remember when I was a teenager, I remember and this is something that teenagers don't have to go through now. I remember the agony of waiting for the phone to ring. You'd sit at home and you're waiting for some boy to call you, or I was waiting for some boy to call me. I'm sure this is a universal experience. But you couldn't go anywhere. You'd have to sit by the phone, and you just wait for this person to call you. And now, teenagers don't have to experience that. And now, they can just, they're always connected, so they're not tethered to their house when they're waiting for that special phone call from that special somebody. Did that happen to you, Conrad? I'm sure you never waited by the phone for somebody to call.
Almost never. I don't remember.
Well, I'm sure there are other people besides me that did that. Maybe not. Maybe it's just me. Somebody help me out here. Somebody tell me they waited by the phone for their boyfriends to call when they were teenagers. I know I did. You know what I think is really interesting is the etiquette piece of this, because like sometimes, so recently Mark and I have been doing a lot of projects around the house, and because we don't have any money, we always have to try to get things on Craigslist, for cheap. And so I've been interacting with people, a lot of strangers. And it seems to me that, like, I always write in complete sentences and I pay attention to, like, my spelling and my punctuation. And I'm nice. I say things like please and thank you. And I put the person's name. I'll say, hey, Mike, and I'll write it like a letter or blah, I'm really interested in this. Could you. And I get back these, like, short, like, grammatically incorrect, the spelling's wrong, there's hardly any information in it, it appears to be rude, even though it probably isn't necessarily, but I just think that's the way people are communicating now. I still communicate like I'm writing a letter when I write to somebody, even in a text, but and I wonder about the erosion of etiquette and if this matters. Just this whole idea that people are just their communication skills have gotten so bad. It's like newspeak or something. I mean, they write the bare minimum of what they need to say. They don't even write in a complete sentence, And they don't say things like please and thank you and sincerely. I don't know. Aren't these things important? Maybe they're not. Maybe that's just me.
Well, I have one explanation for that.
Okay.
I hate typing. So,
yeah.
Writing unnecessary letters, words is, it's hard for, what I mean?
Right. Yeah, okay, I don't know.
It's easy to say
I compose pretty much everything I write. I have a really hard time just sending off some, like...
Well, when you're texting?
Texting, well, first of all, I barely text, but...
Right, I hate texting.
But if I email or text, yes. I pay attention to things like the spelling, the grammar. I say things like please and thank you. I sign it, yes. Maybe not a text. I guess in a text I don't normally sign it or whatever, but
right,
I don't know. It just appears to, and I wonder about, those things are in place for a reason. They help us to connect, and they help us to, like, common courtesy helps us to sort of keep the peace and have good relationships, and if people are just, like, writing these just these short hardly communicating at all, and there's no attention to the way they're conveying, what they're conveying or whatever. I don't know. I'm just wondering if this has an effect on the overall erosion of our interactions with other people. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much of it. I'm sure that when you're remote, it's easier. It's harder to be polite. It's harder to follow certain conventions of talking, of interaction.
Yeah.
Because you're more in private and you're...
Yeah, but then it always seems hostile to me. Like, I think, but when people don't convey any sort of, when they don't say hello, for example, I don't know what they're feeling. I don't know what it always comes off aggressive to me. I'm specifically thinking about these conversations that I have with people on Craigslist, where I'll say, like, could you tell me a little more about this, this thing? And they write back brown. And that's it. Like, they don't say it's brown and it's, such and such a dimension and it's this, that, and the other thing. And, they just write brown. And it comes off as just so abrupt to me, and I don't know, it affects me emotionally.
Well, it depends on the person, on the character of a person, I think. And over the years, we shortened a lot of things. We became more efficient or more lazy. It's like, hey, this is bullshit. We don't need to,
right. It's a bunch of extraneous bullshit. We can just
it's like I was brought up early on.
With it.
That in English you always have to say, how do you do? I am well. And then it turned into, what's up?
When kids graduate from college and have no idea how to write a proper business letter, communication is a problem. I agree with you, except that unless the kids of today are going to be the business leaders of tomorrow, and if they don't care, then nobody's going to care. You need that skill now, I guess, like writing a business letter or being able, you need that skill now, but 20 years from now, are you going to need that skill? I don't know. Once all the old fogies retire, all the people that care about proper business letters retire, that skill's not going to matter anymore. It's going to go the way of cursive writing. I don't know. Aspen is communicating in some strange symbols. We're going back to symbols. I don't know. And there's also there's also the fact that people feel when they're not face to face, they feel more comfortable being hostile and aggressive. Things that they would not say to somebody face to face, they feel perfectly okay saying in an email or a text.
Well, there's an easy explanation for that.
Okay.
You can get punched in the face.
You can't. Exactly. That's true. That's true.
But if somebody looks back to you, just disconnect or whatever.
But I think it's not just that. I think it's also that when you're with somebody, there's a certain amount of restraint because you can see the person and perhaps you feel a little bit of empathy for that person because you're in the same room with them. You can see them.
Well, there is
and
close.
You're not going to say something like, you stupid fucking idiot. You're not going to say that to them face to face because you can see their reaction, and you're going to restrain yourself. But in a text or in an email or whatever, you can't see how the person responds. So it gives you permission to be nasty, and aggressive. But you're right, you also can't get punched in the face. But I also think it has to do with you not seeing how the person is responding to your aggression.
Absolutely, you're removed. You are removed from the, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
No, that does make a big difference.
Yeah, and I think that ultimately that leads to conflict. I mean, if people are communicating that way as a rule and they're not communicating face to face, then all of that, all those interpersonal skills go out the window, and people can just, the aggression that people feel, permission to express is going to ultimately, I think, or could ultimately lead to a lot of conflict in society. When people are when people are just communicating that way, and there's a lot more, people feel like they can attack other people, and they, because there are no consequences or whatever. That leads to an overall erosion of civility.
Well, so just to add to it, it's called isolation.
Yeah.
It's a form of, you can have, talk to somebody over the phone, but it's not the same as in person. Yeah. And you are more isolated. And the extreme would be solitary confinement. And they actually stopped doing that because they realize how bad it is for us.
Oh, I know.
Right. You've read about it, right? Or you've heard.
Yeah, no, I know.
Stopped doing it as a form of punishment because it made people.
Right. No, they haven't stopped. People are still using solitary. I don't think so. No. Okay. But I do think that there's a lot more awareness of the effect that it has on people, permanently. Yeah. Just permanent damage to them mentally, yes.
I know they've made studies on that in prisons, and that it was inhuman punishment. It crossed, it didn't help, it hurt. It wasn't just
right, in the long run. It did more.
You learn.
Yeah, right.
You slap to the butt when you're a little kid, and it helps you learn because, I can't do this. But there is, that's an example of a good punishment, healthy punishment. And then, so
I
prisons,
think, I think the APA would differ with you on that, but anyway.
I don't know what APA is. IPA, I know what IPA is.
The pediatric, the whatever, the American Pediatric Association, or whatever. You know, spanking is considered, any kind of corporal punishment is a big no-no.
I don't know, it was very effective on
But
me.
that's a good topic for another Let's Have Words. We could talk
It was
about that.
very effective on me. It did change. It did bring the point across. The words,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? The words was
Yeah.
just one thing, especially when you're 4 years old, 5 years, when you're little, very little.
Yeah,
It did help because it was like, ooh, this is serious. You know, it did stuck in your head. And anyway, but solitary confinement crossed the line. There were studies
Yeah.
20 years ago, and maybe they didn't stop it, but I know there was.
I don't think so. I could be wrong, but I think that the prison system is still using solitary confinement.
I have
as a
not read up
punishment.
on it. I don't know. I don't follow it. I just did
Yeah.
read. Wow, it was considered by the study that somebody
But
made.
maybe, but they might be a little more, I don't know. Actually, I don't know. I'm just
Yeah, I don't want to. I don't know.
speculating.
Yeah, but
Maybe they're using it less, but I think they're still using it.
I can't. Right. I don't want to get it. I'm no expert on that, but
Yeah,
I was just shocked years ago that it was an inhuman punishment. That's how it was concluded by the
Yeah.
study somebody made.
yes. So we need to be around others. We're social creatures. We're social,
And that's why I came up with maybe the reason is the brain waves that we feel,
maybe that's part of it.
and you can only.
Yeah,
There's also smells, which I'm not so sure how much that affects us.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Because usually, probably will go. You know.
So, yeah, so Lois says when communicating electronic, so this is to add to your sort of, you're talking about human interaction on like a physics level, but Lois is also saying, you know, there's also like the sensory
Right.
experience, like smelling the other person, and which isn't always a good thing. No, I'm just kidding. But smelling the other person and just all that sensory stuff that you need, it's all information. It's all information that I think adds somehow to the overall quality of the interaction.
Well, another thing is like a handshake. What comes to
No
my
more
mind.
handshakes, Conrad. We're done with that. COVID cured us of the handshake.
When I.
Thank God. I hate the handshake. Now we're just gonna like do a little elbow bump or a little finger touch or something.
Okay, so I will not go in comment on that.
No, go ahead. What were you going to say about
Let me
handshake?
reiterate. The handshake was only between men originally,
Okay,
not between women wouldn't handshake. Only men would handshake.
yeah, well, everybody shakes hands. Or everybody was shaking hands before COVID, and now
Do
forget
you know
it.
why? Do you know what the purpose of the handshake was, or the reason?
To spread germs.
You are joking.
Of course. Why? Yes, go ahead, tell me. What
You don't
is the
know why?
handshake? It's some sort of trust. It's some sort of trust.
So you don't know why?
I'm not sure if I know why, so why don't you tell me?
Okay, so we used to carry a sword, and when you met somebody and you stuck your hand, you're nothing. You're
Right,
not
that's like, it's a trust thing. It's like I have nothing in my hand.
no weapon.
I have no weapon.
And it was the sword originally. You would either carry a sword or you could stick out your hand and then you would
Right.
and you would take the gloves off and stuff if you had to wear gloves to make it proper.
Yeah.
But yeah, so originally it was between men. That's why as women we probably don't feel the same way.
I don't think so. I shake people's hands. I don't know. I don't even
No,
think
I
about
know
it.
it changed. I'm talking about 1,000 years or whatever the hell. it is.
Yes. Okay. Fine. Yes, you're talking about the evolution of the handshake.
Right. So
Yeah.
the original was to show that you are unarmed.
Yes. Well, it makes sense. Yeah. Although you do have another hand, so you could be shaking the hand, and then you could come around with the sword.
Clearly. Well, clearly, but it was
So it doesn't
symbolic.
really make a lot of sense.
No, it was
Because
symbolic.
most people have a second hand.
No, but Kaylin, it was symbolic.
It was symbolic. I got it.
You know, I mean, it wasn't just totally
I
practical.
got it.
It wasn't totally practical, but it was a symbol of,
Yes.
you know,
Yes,
peaceful.
you can't shake hands in virtual in the
Right.
virtual world. Although in the metaverse, people are going to be able to shake hands. Right?
They're gonna stimulate the hand there to
So
to
the meta, this is a three-dimensional world that people are going to be able to interact in.
yeah, but it's not gonna be fully sensory. It's not gonna stimulate
And I
our.
don't know, they're starting to my understanding is there's some technology that makes, things like smell possible
Yeah.
in that world.
So eventually we can turn into, as millions of years go by, into pot of jelly and just conscious jelly,
Yeah.
experience everything through
Yes, experience everything that way.
through
Yeah,
simulation.
and it's like, well, what's the difference between that and reality? Well, the difference is that it simulates reality, except that you can be whoever you want. You don't have to. You're not restricted by your your genetics. You're not restricted.
Sounds like cheating
You
to me.
you can be beautiful. You can be athletic. You can be whatever you want. But and you can interact in a three-dimensional environment with possibly even some of the sensory, benefits of actual reality.
So one thing,
That might be the future.
so one thing I'm not sure, maybe this wasn't part of your topic. Maybe I missed, but I thought at first we would be talking about how Facebook is used, social media,
Yeah, we can talk a little bit. We haven't really talked a lot about social media. We can talk a little bit about
because
that.
it's part of the communication now. You
Absolutely.
can post something, whether on Twitter or whatever, Facebook or whatever, a couple, few things like that, and all of a sudden, millions of people can read it, see it,
Yeah.
which is again good and bad. We
Yeah,
didn't have
right. It has right. Like anything, it has pros and cons, of course.
right with phones, we didn't have that for sure. Now
Yeah.
with we can just with internet we didn't, but now that there's the apps, applications, programs that the social media stuff, and that's again good and bad.
Yeah.
You know, now you can spread lies, and millions of people can see it. And
Right. Yeah, it's much easier to spread misinformation,
right.
but yeah. I mean, right. So all tools have like that have advantages and disadvantages, but I think we're trying to focus on this particular time when we're talking about a society's, the effect on society. We're just talking about like sort of the shift from more face-to-face communication to more, texting and emailing and stuff, and the effect that shift has
Well,
on our, interpersonal interactions and on, just our experience, the human experience in general,
so so to me, we are becoming somewhat estranged to each other.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, I
of
mean,
that.
and the other thing is that, even though we're more connected, loneliness is rife. So even though people are more connected, they're even more lonely. Even though you might have 300 friends on Facebook, you're still lonely because you don't have any real friends. You don't have any actual friends. So that's a huge problem. Because the focus is on quantity rather than quality, and also the focus is on sort of showing off, like showing everybody like what's going on in your life and how great you are, as opposed to having interaction and discussion.
Well, the difference too is that you don't have to be responsible. You can always unfriend somebody or however. Where if
Yeah.
it's a neighbor or if you go to a local bar, however you get to know somebody, whether it's neighbor, school, job, bar, where you go, where you hang out or place where you hang out.
Yeah.
and you really, there is consequences. You can't, if you insult, if you get into a fight with somebody, you can't go back there. You know what I mean? Or your neighbor can break your windows. There will be, and on the internet, there's just, who cares?
Yep.
That
That's
makes,
right. They're right. There's no, right. There's no consequence. There are no consequences. There's no follow-up.
and
You,
that
you
makes
know.
that makes us also a little bit estranged.
We didn't even get to talk about this ghosting situation, which drives me nuts. Drives me nuts when you're talking to somebody, you're having a conversation, and suddenly they just don't respond and they're gone.
Well, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, like you would never do that in a face-to-face conversation. Like you'd never be talking to somebody and then just
That's
drift
exactly
off
what
and never return, you know?
it-
You would say something like, "Excuse me for a minute," or, I really, I want to continue this conversation at a later date. Or you would say something. You wouldn't just drift off.
right. Right.
Yeah.
That's what I was.
Yeah,
That's exactly what I was talking about.
I
That
don't know.
friends are, when the Facebook friends are not quote real friends, as you said, because it's not real people.
It's not meaningful interaction.
Well,
It's
you could be
it's superficial. It's
You
superficial.
could be talking to a computer. You don't know.
Yeah.
You could be talking to artificial intelligence. You don't know.
I don't know. All right, we're going to give Ronnie the last word here. Technology has always given her true friends that she never would have met. There you go. This is nice. I like to leave things on a positive spin anyway, and some that she hasn't met yet. Yes, you definitely get to meet more like-minded people. There's no doubt that there are a lot of really positive things that have come from like social media and, but I'm not sure about relying on it. It's a good way to make connections with other people, but then you actually want to meet those people in person at some point and interact with them in real space. I don't know. Conrad, what do you think? I'll give you one more statement on this before we check out here for Let's Have Words.
Well, I definitely do think it's overall good.
Overall good.
Except when people abuse it in the sense that they substitute for having real friends in person.
Yeah, I think that's my biggest concern is that
overdo it.
yeah.
Using it, you're doing it somewhat, it's fantastic. Doing it a lot, questionable. And substituting meeting real people
Right.
is wrong.
That's the main fear is that a big chunk of young people don't want to have like any face-to-face
And that's
conversation
crazy.
at all.
And that's crazy.
They're done with it. They're over it.
But
They're done.
referring
Yeah.
to as crazy. If there's people like that, that's
Yeah.
crossed the line, that's gone too far. It's no good.
All right. It's no good. Gone too far. But like usual, we have not gone too far in the show. We're just having a nice, comfortable conversation about technology and its effect on communication. So we covered a lot of ground. We covered a lot of territory tonight. And thank you very much for people who participated. We had some great comments and great interaction. Thank you, Conrad, as always, for coming on the show and bantering with me. So this week on Let's Have Words, we were talking about technology and communication. Last week we talked about Dungeons and Dragons with our friend Jason Campbell. The week before that we talked about social Darwinism. You never know what subjects are going to arise on Let's Have Words. So we are a show that's about communication. We're about celebrating the art of communication and I would say overall. Folks here at Let's Have Words are in favor of face-to-face communication as much as possible. So that's the last word on that. And I do want to mention that we are always looking for people to come on the show. And if you would like to be on Let's Have Words, please email us at www.hrmedia@gmail.com. We entertain a lot of different topics, from the sacred to the profane, doesn't matter. We are entertained, from arts and culture, science, anything at all. Nature, philosophy, whatever you want to talk about, we are open to it. So if you have something you think would be good for this show, please write to us. My name is Lara Samuels. We're checking out here on Let's Have Words on this wonderful Sunday, and hopefully we will see you next week, and in the meantime, please keep those lines of communication open.
Let's have words. Let's have words. Say what it's all about. We're gonna say what it's about.